There's been a dramatic shift in the way audiences, especially women, are talking about Blake Lively. Once a Hollywood darling praised for her elegant style and close ties with stars like Taylor Swift, Blake is now facing a mounting backlash. And it's not coming from the usual critics, it's coming from the very fans who once adored her. On platforms like TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, and Instagram, more and more women are asking, has Blake Lively been playing us this whole time? This isn't about a single scandal or out of context headline. This is deeper. This is about trust, accountability, and the image. Blake spent years cultivating a brand built on timeless grace, female empowerment, and strategic silence. But in today's era of transparency and digital discourse, silence is no longer seen as classy, it's seen as calculated. And for many women, Blake's silence, especially around her alleged legal tactics, associations, and the reported targeting of small content creators, feels less like self-protection and more like manipulation. Why are women turning on Blake? Because many now believe her image was never as authentic as it appeared. Because they see her distancing herself from female allies like Taylor Swift at critical moments. Because legal documents suggest her team tried to suppress free speech, particularly from female creators. And because in a time when women are demanding honesty and solidarity, Blake is giving them curated Instagram posts and filtered red carpet appearances. This isn't just a backlash, it's a reckoning, and it reveals something far more unsettling than a celebrity misstep. It shows what happens when a woman builds an empire on female support and then appears to betray it. In this video, we break down the real reasons women are turning away from Blake Lively, and why this moment matters far beyond Hollywood. Something unexpected is happening in the world of celebrity culture. Blake Lively, once hailed as Hollywood's golden girl and praised for her seemingly effortless elegance and charm, is now at the center of a growing cultural backlash, and it's being led not by tabloids or gossip journalists, but by women. It's not that Blake Lively is canceled. It's more complex than that. This is about trust, authenticity, and a slow-burning shift in how fans, particularly women, perceive her role in a larger conversation about power, narrative, control, and solidarity. The same public that once applauded her poise is now questioning the intent behind it. The discourse didn't ignite overnight. Blake's rise to fame was accompanied by a carefully controlled public image, from her breakout role as Serena Van Der Woodsen on Gossip Girl to her status as one half of a power couple with Ryan Reynolds. Blake cultivated an aura of perfection. She didn't just act, she branded herself. She didn't just walk red carpets, she styled herself. She wasn't merely a celebrity, she was a lifestyle, and for years it worked. She was aspirational but not unattainable, elegant but seemingly relatable. In a world full of overexposed stars, Blake offered control, class, and curated grace. But today that very curation is under fire. It started subtly. At first it was murmurs on fashion forums, stylists speaking off the record about how difficult she could be behind the scenes, how every look was micromanaged, and how feedback wasn't welcomed unless it echoed her own vision. That alone wouldn't spark a backlash. Plenty of celebrities are demanding, it's practically part of the job. But it was the timing of these stories, coupled with a changing tone in Blake's public behavior and her legal entanglements, that shifted the narrative. Then came the lawsuit. When Blake Lively's name surfaced in legal documents tied to Justin Baldoni's defamation suit, a sprawling, emotionally charged case with multiple Hollywood figures entangled, it immediately raised questions. While Blake wasn't initially the central figure, her name became impossible to ignore. When court documents revealed that her legal team had allegedly targeted content creators and commentators, some of these creators were small independent voices with modest followings, the legal tactics appeared aggressive and unusually personal. This is where things began to fracture. Women, many of whom had long admired Blake's polished brand of femininity and discretion, began voicing their discomfort. TikTok creators published side-by-side comparisons of Blake's past interviews versus her recent statements. Reddit threads exploded with detailed timelines, screenshots, and court analysis. It wasn't just about Blake's participation in the case, it was about what her actions symbolized. If she truly believed in female empowerment and authenticity, why was she allegedly attempting to silence smaller voices? Why was she appearing in leaked legal filings that showed coordinated efforts to control the narrative? The backlash was organic. It didn't come from major outlets. It didn't start with hit pieces. It came from the very fanbase that once adored her. They weren't angry because she made a mistake. They were disappointed because they felt deceived. Many had looked to Blake as a symbol of modern womanhood, someone who knew how to succeed in male-dominated spaces without sacrificing her femininity. or authenticity, but now it seemed that image had been a performance, a carefully rehearsed character. This feeling of betrayal only deepened as more details emerged. Influencers with as little as 1,000 followers began receiving legal threats. Journalists who questioned the motives of certain court filings suddenly found themselves in legal gray areas. The optics were impossible to ignore a powerful celebrity using her legal might to go after individuals with significantly less influence or resources. Women began asking, is this what empowerment looks like? But it wasn't just the legal moves that ignited the firestorm, it was the silence. Blake didn't address the backlash. She didn't issue clarifications. She didn't offer transparency. While the court battle raged on and social media grew louder, she posted carefully filtered photos of pastries, fashion collabs, and her husband's film promos. The disconnect became glaring. The woman who once seemed so engaged, so aware of her image, now appeared aloof and untouched by the mounting discourse. For many, that silence was louder than any statement. What added fuel to the fire was her connection to Taylor Swift. The two have been close for years, publicly and privately. Taylor has been no stranger to scrutiny herself, but she's also been praised for her openness about growth, mistakes, and public missteps. In contrast, Blake's recent approach, stoic silence and legal distancing, seemed cold. Many fans began comparing the two. Why was Taylor evolving with the times, taking ownership of her narrative? While Blake appeared to hide behind attorneys and PR strategies, public sympathy began to shift. Justin Baldoni, who initially had his own set of critics, began gaining traction as someone who was being unfairly targeted. His supporters argued that he was being framed and smeared, and that the public deserved to see the full picture. When it became clear that some of the suppressed content involved conversations between women, including messages related to female friendships and trust, the tone of the backlash changed completely. Women now saw Blake not just as a celebrity in crisis, but as someone allegedly betraying the very values she championed. The language shifted too. Once praised for her old Hollywood glamour, Blake was now called a brand in crisis. Commentators dissected how every move, from her fashion choices to her public appearances, felt like a distraction from the deeper issues. The criticism wasn't rooted in malice, it was rooted in disappointment. And that's perhaps the most powerful and painful form of backlash any public figure can face, being turned on by those who once cheered you on. The turning point became undeniable when smaller creators began sharing videos with titles like "Why I Can't Support Blake Lively Anymore" or "The Truth About Blake's Silence." These weren't hit pieces. They were nuanced, thoughtful commentaries that expressed genuine confusion and heartbreak. Some women even said they felt manipulated by her brand, as if Blake had used her image of empowerment and grace to earn their trust, only to abandon those ideals when it counted most. To make things more complicated, some of Blake's brand deals began to feel tone-deaf. In the context of the growing backlash, ads that promoted wellness, authenticity, or women's support began to feel performative. Critics noted that while she positioned herself as a champion of women, she hadn't acknowledged or apologized for actions that contradicted that image. It's important to acknowledge here that Blake hasn't been found guilty of any crime, nor has she made inflammatory statements that typically precede public backlash. But the issue is more nuanced than that. This isn't about legal guilt. It's about cultural responsibility. When you build a brand on relatability, sisterhood, and moral clarity, you're held to a different standard. And that's the very standard so many women feel she's failed to meet. By the time #BlakeLivelyBackLiz began trending, it was clear that the public was no longer content with the polished surface. They wanted answers, accountability, and something real. The tide had turned, and not because of one explosive headline, but because of a slow, painful erosion of trust. Trust that she had earned over years of carefully cultivated loyalty from fans who felt seen and represented by her. And that erosion, that feeling of being fooled, is what makes this backlash so unique. It's not loud and chaotic, it's quiet but persistent. Women aren't just unfollowing, they're unpacking. They're writing essays, making documentaries, and examining the deeper dynamics at play. When powerful women use their influence in ways that seem to betray the very values they claim to embody, what happens next may depend on how Blake chooses to respond, or if she chooses to respond at all. But one thing is clear: the era of passive celebrity worship is over. Audiences, especially women, are more informed, more critical, and more engaged than ever before. And Blake Lively is finding out in real time what happens when a brand, no matter how beautifully packaged, begins to feel hollow from within. The backlash against Blake Lively didn't just stem from cultural disappointment. It evolved sharply in response to the legal choices her team began making, and the emerging perception that her actions were not only overly aggressive but deeply misaligned with the values she publicly promoted. What began as discomfort with Blake's silence and subtle contradictions quickly escalated when allegations surfaced that her legal team had been actively targeting small content creators, independent journalists, and even fans who had simply asked too many questions. The legal context is vital here. The ongoing defamation case between Justin Baldoni and a group of media figures began making headlines, not just because of the celebrity names involved, but because of the unusual depth of the legal strategies being deployed. Blake's name, though not the central figure in the lawsuit, began showing up in documents that revealed a coordinated legal campaign to manage perception. In short, it looked less like a celebrity defending herself and more like a high-powered machine trying to control who was allowed to speak. Women across platforms, especially those in online media and creator spaces, took notice. Legal threats were reportedly being sent to small YouTubers and TikTokers with barely a few thousand followers. These weren't individuals pushing wild conspiracy theories or publishing false stories. They were analyzing court documents, offering commentary, or voicing personal opinions. When Blake's team allegedly lumped them in with malicious actors, it crossed an invisible but critical boundary: the right to public discussion. What made it worse was that many of these creators were women who had once supported Blake, bought products she endorsed, and looked up to her for guidance in branding, family, and career balance. Now they were being told legally that their voices were defamatory or harmful simply for engaging with a public story. To them, it felt like betrayal. And in today's digital landscape, that kind of betrayal doesn't go unnoticed. Several creators spoke out, carefully documenting their experiences and sharing their perspectives. One former Blake fan, a TikToker known for celebrity commentary, shared in a viral video that she had received a soft legal notice warning her to remove her content. She hadn't accused Blake of anything. She'd simply analyzed the leaked court information and offered commentary on the implications. Her message to viewers was chilling: if Blake's team can come for someone like me, they can come for anyone. This sparked a wave of digital solidarity. Hashtags like #LetWomenSpeak, #BlakeLively and #CreatorsAreNotCriminals began to gain traction. Commentators on Reddit began gathering and archiving receipts of legal letters, takedown notices, and threats not to attack Blake but to expose what they felt was a dangerous precedent. That celebrity influence was now being weaponized to silence dissent, especially from women. In many ways, this backlash echoed themes that have rippled through broader feminist conversations over the past decade. The idea that women who reach power should be held accountable for how they use it, that empowerment doesn't mean immunity, that female solidarity can't just be performative, it must exist even when it's inconvenient. Blake's response, or lack thereof, did little to cool the fire. She stayed silent. There was no acknowledgement of the growing criticism, no public comment clarifying her intentions. The only message was a continued rollout of curated content, fashion partnerships, family posts, and red carpet appearances. That's when the conversation began shifting further from disappointment to disillusionment. A major turning point came when legal experts began speaking out on social media and in interviews. Several lawyers who follow entertainment cases closely started breaking down the legal strategies that had allegedly been used by Blake's team. One lawyer in particular explained that the cease and desist notices being sent out weren't just aggressive, they bordered on intimidation. They're targeting commentary, not slander. The lawyer said, "This isn't about protecting a reputation anymore, it's about control." For many women, especially those working in the content space, the message was clear. Your voice is only valid until it inconveniences someone powerful. The narrative took on a deeper feminist lens. Commentary channels, many of them run by women, began publishing videos dissecting the wider implications. They questioned what it meant for a woman like Blake, who had benefited so greatly from the support of women, to now seemingly be contributing to a climate of fear around open discourse. They asked if this is how she treats criticism, what does that say about her understanding of power? One creator pointed out a particularly ironic thread that Blake had once delivered a now famous speech about lifting other women up. She had spoken passionately at a charity gala about the importance of empowering female voices and protecting their right to be heard. Now, years later, she was at the center of a legal campaign that appeared to do the exact opposite. This disconnect between what Blake had once stood for and what she now seemed to be doing formed the emotional heart of the backlash. It wasn't personal hatred, it wasn't cruelty. It was disappointment at its deepest level. The kind of disappointment that only comes when someone you admire no longer reflects the values you believed you shared. This moment also brought forth a wave of introspection in digital spaces. Women began openly discussing how often they've been encouraged to support powerful women no matter what and how dangerous that blind loyalty can become. It's not anti-feminist to hold powerful women accountable, one viral TikTok post read. It's feminist to ensure power doesn't corrupt no matter who holds it. There was also a generational aspect to the shift, younger audiences especially. Gen Z tend to demand transparency and direct engagement from public figures. They're less interested in traditional PR or glossy perfection. In fact, the more curated a celebrity's brand appears, the more skeptical these audiences become. Blake's silence and polish, once seen as elegant, now came across as evasive. Some of Blake's most devoted fans found themselves conflicted. They didn't want to tear her down. They wanted her to acknowledge the moment, to say something real, to show that she understood the implications of her actions even if she couldn't speak on legal specifics. But as the weeks passed with no public acknowledgement, even her defenders began to drift away. Interestingly, this backlash didn't prompt a major media storm from mainstream outlets. It remained a grassroots movement sustained by podcasts, YouTube creators, TikTok analysts, and Reddit forums. That's part of what made it so powerful. It wasn't manufactured drama, it was real-time cultural reckoning from the ground up. Another layer emerged when fans began re-examining Blake's past interviews and public behavior. Several clips resurfaced showing moments that, while innocuous at the time, now seemed performative in hindsight. One interview in particular showed Blake talking about her decision not to hire stylists, an idea once celebrated as self-sufficient and refreshing. But now critics pointed out how that narrative helped fuel a perception of perfection, while masking how tightly managed her image truly was. This re-examination led to an important question. Had the public ever really seen the real Blake Lively, or had they simply consumed the version she so expertly presented? And if it was the latter, did the audience have a right to feel manipulated? For many women, the answer was yes. Because when a public figure builds their empire on the support of women, through beauty, fashion, motherhood, friendship, and then uses that very platform to control or silence other women, it's more than just PR, it's betrayal. At the center of the storm stood Blake, quiet, composed, and conspicuously absent from the discourse. The longer she remained silent, the louder the backlash became. It wasn't just about legal strategy anymore. It was about what kind of woman Blake Lively was choosing to be in a moment that called for honesty and integrity. To this day, Blake has yet to directly address the criticism, and perhaps she believes that silence is the safest path. But in a cultural moment defined by transparency, many of her former fans now see that silence as the ultimate statement and not the one they hoped for. As the legal storm around Blake Lively intensified, another layer of complexity unfolded, one that cut deeper than contracts, courtroom strategies, or stylistic branding. It was the perceived betrayal of something far more personal: sisterhood. And nowhere was this more sharply felt than in her longtime friendship with Taylor Swift. For over a decade, Blake and Taylor had stood side by side at award shows, during vacations and birthday tributes, and even as collaborators in quiet, creative ways. Their friendship had become symbolic in pop culture to powerful, successful women who had seemingly found genuine connection in a world known for superficiality. But as controversy engulfed Blake, many began to notice a stark shift both in her dynamic with Taylor and in the broader perception of what their bond really represented. Taylor, known for her open expressions of female solidarity, had been remarkably silent on the entire situation. And while silence from friends during legal issues isn't unusual, it became notable when placed next to Blake's own behavior, particularly as rumors swirled about Blake attempting to distance herself from Taylor behind the scenes. The speculation was fueled by Blake's lack of public defense for Taylor during past controversies, especially the era when Taylor was being publicly attacked by media figures, record labels, and even fellow celebrities. Fans remembered how Taylor stood up for her friends countless times, writing songs calling out injustices, defending reputations. Blake, on the other hand, had always remained quiet. At first it was seen as discretion, but now many fans were reinterpreting that silence as strategic distance. This shift was underscored when Blake's name began to surface, alongside that of Candace Owens, a conservative commentator who had launched very public and aggressive critiques against Taylor Swift. Candace, who is known for her polarizing takes and anti-feminist rhetoric, had positioned herself as a cultural watchdog, often targeting figures who represent progressive values. So when Blake's legal efforts were revealed to include figures within the commentary and content creation space, some of whom had openly supported Swift, many fans saw it as indirect alignment with the same tactics Candace used. It didn't help that Candace herself seized on the moment. She began posting celebratory messages about Blake's legal victories, praising her for not backing down and for standing up to the leftist media complex. While Blake did not publicly respond to or encourage these comments, the optics were deeply unsettling to those who saw the message being amplified. Suddenly, a woman who had been synonymous with classy feminism was being championed by voices who openly opposed feminist ideals. For many women, this was the breaking point. It wasn't just about the lawsuit anymore, it was about identity. It was about the contradiction between Blake's carefully nurtured brand of empowerment and the perceived willingness to benefit from support that came from those who actively worked against women's equality and free expression. The situation began to feel less like a case of one celebrity defending herself, and more like a cultural reckoning over how powerful women use or misuse their influence. This is where the conversation turned philosophical. Think pieces emerged, questioning the nature of female friendships in Hollywood. Are they real? Are they strategic? What happens when sisterhood is used as PR currency, but abandoned in moments of public crisis? One viral post summarized the mood. Blake Lively isn't being cancelled, she's being unmasked. This feeling of disillusionment grew further as Taylor Swift's inner circle remained notably quiet. In the past, we had seen Selena Gomez, Gigi Hadid, and even Ryan Reynolds speak up in moments of solidarity or celebration. But now there was only eerie silence. Fans speculated that a fracture had formed between Blake and Taylor. Not necessarily a dramatic fallout, but a quiet recognition that their public alliance no longer served either of them. Meanwhile, Blake continued with business as usual: red carpet appearances, brand partnerships, carefully filtered posts. But to many observers, those glossy images now felt hollow. The warmth was gone, the authenticity seemed forced. Her brand, once admired for its timeless charm and effortless confidence, was now being scrutinized for what it had always possibly been: a mirage. Public reaction was not monolithic. Some still supported Blake, arguing that she had every right to protect her name and privacy. Others said the backlash was overblown, that creators knew the risk of engaging in commentary and should be prepared for legal consequences. But for a significant and vocal portion of the audience, especially women, the issue wasn't about legality, it was about principle, about trust, about the quiet expectation that when one woman is attacked, her peers stand up for her, not with words necessarily, but with actions. It's worth pausing here to consider how power changes our perception of solidarity. In the early stages of Blake's career, her rise was rooted in female fan support. Fashion blogs championed her looks, gossip forums defended her choices, social media celebrated her parenting. But with power comes responsibility and, more importantly, scrutiny. The expectation isn't just that you continue looking beautiful or charming. It's that you use your influence to protect the very community that built you up. When that expectation is broken, even subtly, the consequences are deep. Women no longer saw themselves in Blake. They saw someone who seemed untouched by the very system she once benefited from. Someone who wasn't afraid to weaponize legal systems against women who asked too many questions, but couldn't be bothered to publicly affirm those who had stood beside her when it was easy. The Taylor Swift contrast made it starker. Taylor, while far from perfect, has always been willing to evolve publicly. She addresses her mistakes, she rewrites her narrative, she engages. Blake, on the other hand, has always taken the opposite approach, remaining aloof above the fray. But in today's era, that approach no longer works. Distance now reads as avoidance, silence feels like arrogance, and control feels manipulative. The backlash then isn't just a reaction to what Blake did, it's a reaction to what she didn't do. She didn't show up for her audience, she didn't respond with humility, she didn't engage with the criticism, and in doing so she revealed a deeper truth that many fans are now reckoning with, that the Blake they believed in may have been a projection all along. As the narrative continues to unfold, the conversation around Blake Lively has become symbolic of a larger issue: how we as a culture construct and deconstruct the women we admire, how we demand vulnerability but reward perfection, how we say we want honesty but often punish those who show it, and most of all, how we must constantly ask whether the women we lift up are truly standing with us or simply standing above us. For Blake, the path to redemption may still be open, but it won't come through silence or curated images. It will require something far scarier: vulnerability, an acknowledgement of the hurt, a recognition of the power imbalance, and a willingness to step down from the pedestal and meet her audience eye to eye. Until that happens, the backlash is likely to continue, not out of hate but out of heartbreak, and in many ways that's far more powerful. The backlash against Blake Lively isn't about hatred, cancel culture, or petty drama. It's about a deeper cultural shift. Audiences, especially women, are no longer content with surface-level branding or carefully polished public images. They want sincerity, they want accountability, and most importantly, they want the public figures they support to live the values they promote. Blake Lively built her brand on elegance, discretion, and female empowerment, but when push came to shove, many feel she didn't just remain silent, she actively distanced herself from the very communities that once championed her. From her involvement in the Justin Baldoni legal controversy to her silence around Taylor Swift and her alleged legal actions against small creators, the perception has shifted. Where fans once saw grace, they now see control. Where they once saw solidarity, they now sense self-preservation. And where they once felt admiration, they now feel disappointment. But this isn't just about Blake, it's about a much bigger conversation. About how fame is evolving in the digital age. About how influencers, creators, and everyday women are no longer afraid to call out power even when that power wears a designer dress and posts filtered family photos. The Blake Lively backlash shows us that celebrity worship is fading, and in its place is a growing demand for truth. Will Blake Lively acknowledge the moment? Will she reclaim the trust she's lost? That remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, the days of unquestioned admiration are over. Audiences now hold receipts, ask questions, and expect real answers. And for stars like Blake, navigating this new reality means learning to speak not just with style but with substance, because in this era silence is no longer golden, it's damning.